Remember, we are into the second quarter of the year. Woohoo! Never too late to reset. Never too late to regroup. Never too late to get going. Because remember, the most important project you could ever work on is you. Welcome to Life of a CISO. I'm Dr. Eric Cole, your host, and we'll be taking you on a journey each week on what it takes to be a CISO and what are solutions that you can implement today if you are currently a Chief Information Security Officer or if you want to be one in the future. This is Life of a CISO. Welcome, 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 welcome. You know what time it is. Dun, dun, dun. It's time for Life of a CISO with yours truly. Dr. E is in the house. Hope you are doing awesome and amazing and you are crushing it. Remember, we are into the second quarter of the year. Woohoo! Never too late to reset. Never too late to regroup. Never too late to get going. Because remember, the most important project you could ever work on is you. So don't ever give up. You can reset, you can regroup, you can restart as many times as you want. But here's the most important thing. If you're going to reset or restart, make sure you make some changes. Make sure you do things differently because you know the name of the game. If you keep doing what you've always done, you'll keep getting what you've always had. And this is really the best advice I give to people who want to become a CISO. I get this in my open channels. I get this in my group coaching. I get this in my private coaching. I get this on my high-end elite one-on-one coaching with CISOs, 15 years that want to move up to Fortune 5 or even become CEOs. And what I always hear is, Eric, I keep trying to get a job as a CISO, or I keep trying to get promoted. I keep trying to move to another company and it's just not happening. Should I just give up, stop, and accept that maybe this wasn't meant for me? And the answer is, I'll start with the last part. Never, ever give up. Never, ever stop. But two things I always bring in. When somebody says, Eric, I've tried, but it's just not working. The first thing I'll say is, okay, how many jobs did you apply to? Because this was a recent case. I always keep the clients anonymous unless they give me explicit permission, but the general context applies to so many, you wouldn't be able to figure out who the person was because I get this one so many times. It's like, Eric, I have tried to become a CISO. It's just not working. I get no job offers. This is just not for me. And I'm like, great. In the last year, in the last 12 months, how many jobs did you apply to? And they're like, 1. Really? Are we really having this conversation? Because I'll always try to put a little humor into it because I need to break their frame. So whenever we're working together or dealing, if I sort of do a little humor, a little aggressive, something that seems a little off, it's because I need to break your frame. Because here's the reality. That person actually believes they've tried. Applying to one job, let me help you out here. That's not trying. I mean, that's betting on one horse, and if it doesn't work, you've given up. I go, okay, why don't we get some data? Why don't we apply to 30 jobs for becoming a CISO? Why don't we apply for 30? So our goal is not to get a job. Our goal is to apply to 30 jobs. That's what I want you to focus on. So I want you to apply to as many CISO jobs as you possibly can. Agree? Agreed. Great. So come back a month later. I'm like, great, give me an update. Like, Eric, I told you it's just not working. You know what I mean? Nobody wants to hire me. Nobody wants to give me a job. I'm like, okay, go give me, I want a list of the 30 jobs that you applied to. And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, wasn't that our agreement? And they're like, oh, well, I only applied to one more, so I only applied to 2. But we agreed to 30. And then they go in, and they're like, but Eric, there weren't any jobs. And I'm like, wait, you're telling me nowhere in the world people are hiring CISOs? Nowhere in the country people are hiring CISOs. Oh, but Eric, I didn't say to filter out. The objective, the task I gave you was to apply to 30 jobs. I don't care if you won't take the job. What I want to do is we want to get data, and we want to get flight time. We want to get experience. We want to see, because if you applied to 30 jobs and you get no interviews, that's easy. We got to fix your CV. And if you apply to 30 jobs and 27 of them give you a first interview and you don't get a second interview, then I know your CV is rock solid, but I know you're not showing up as a CISO. And if we go in and you apply to 30 and 27 give you interviews and 20 you make it to the 3rd round and then you don't get any offers, that's a different issue where you're having trouble with the close. But I need the data to know where the problem is. But I actually played a trick on you, because that task is giving me data. You're afraid. You're afraid that you're not good enough. And that's what I wanted to see. I wanted to see where the problem was, because if you truly believed you were CISO material and you weren't afraid, and I told you to apply for 30 jobs, what would you have done? You would have applied for 50. And you would have came back with data. So the lack of action is actually useful data for me. So then I was able to focus in on, okay, why don't you feel that you're CISO material? Why don't you feel that you are capable of applying to jobs? Because clearly you're making excuses, and excuses means there's a part of you that is uncomfortable, a part of you that doesn't want to do this. And then we go in and dissect and realize it's because early in their career, somebody said, hey, I'm so glad you're a security engineer because you don't communicate very well and you would never make it in management. Now, here's the crazy part. If it was the right situation with a person you respect, where you're in a highly influential phase of your life, that alone could be the obstacle that's stopping you. Because here's what happens. If we're in a state where we're learning and growing, and we have trusted people around us that say things, when people say things and give opinions about who we are, it is fictional. It's their view of the world. It's an opinion. It's not true. There's no fact to it. That boss or senior executive that said, I'm glad you're a security engineer because you're not good at communicating. You would never make it up in management. What real data did they have? Did they really study you? Did they really understand? No, so it's fictional. It's purely fictional. But you trusted them. You believed it. It became faction. And then now when you go to apply for jobs and you go to look for jobs, all you're hearing is, I'm not a good communicator. I won't make it in upper management, and you don't apply for the jobs. So the trick, and I can help you, but remember, you can also help yourself. That's why I tend to give away a lot more in my free open podcast than most other people and most other coaches. Because my philosophy is, I want to help you. And I want to give you the data. And what I find is if I'm showing you that it works and I'm letting you do it, then when you have real hard problems, you'll come back to me. So I'm different than many where most coaches will go in and tease you and go, I have the secret, but they won't tell you what it is. I'm telling you what we do. I'm telling you how we do it. So you can either do it yourself if you're struggling and not able to do it yourself. As I said, sometimes a third party can observe and see things you can't see. And this process often goes quick, but that's what you want to do. So if you're stuck in an area of your life, there's some limiting belief that is holding you back. There's some limiting belief that's not allowing you to go to your full potential. So we can work together or you can work on it. But once you find that fictional data that you became non-fictional, that became truth, and you remove it, everything will start to change. So that's that wasn't what I planned on. If you follow my podcast, you'll notice that I have a script, but I always, before every podcast, I sort of do a meditation where I sort of connect with all of you energetically. And I'm like, what do people need to hear? And then I let the first part just take me. Sometimes it's 2 minutes. Sometimes in this case, it's 10 minutes. But I know somebody out there needed to hear that. Somebody out there needed to know that you are awesome and you can do this. Don't listen to other people. Only listen to yourself. But the main topic that I planned on talking about is every 6, 7, 8 months, I gather data. And what I'm really good at, one of my superpowers, is pattern recognition. I can recognize and see patterns very, very quickly. So I can spend 20, 30 minutes with somebody and I can see their patterns of exactly why they're where they are and what they're holding back. So I spent a lot of time with CISOs and realize that there's patterns in CISOs that are successful and there's patterns in CISOs that are not successful. And I group them together and I'll periodically do one of these podcasts focus on this. So this is about lessons learned first. One of the things I've seen about really successful CISOs, when I contrast them to CISOs that struggle and are not successful, is the more you listen and the less you talk, the more successful you are as a chief information security officer. Crazy thing, not really crazy if you break it down. And it's simple. As a security engineer, which is where most of you started, even if you're that 10% that are on the business side, most of my audience, I would say, is about 70% security engineers, 10% business people, and then 20% of folks in random fields that just like what I say. And even though it's life of a CISO, they know it can apply to any area of their life. So when you're starting off, the first couple of years of your career, whether it's security engineer, business, or whatever it is you're doing, you need to prove yourself. Because there's a lot of folks there, and you need to show that you're different and unique. You need to show that you're willing to do what other people are not willing to do. So we're trained that if you're quiet and listen, you're not going to be as successful as somebody who talks or asks questions, right? Same thing in college, right? The quiet student that never talks, never asks questions, tends not to do as well because the teacher doesn't think they're engaged. So if you ask good questions, if you answer questions, if you're more interactive, the teacher knows who you are, and that's considered a good thing. So society, we've sort of formed this impression that talking and telling people about what you know and the answers and how smart you are is a good thing. You get rewarded for that. So for 3, 4, 5 years of our career, that's what we're encouraged to do. Talk, talk, talk. Show how smart we are. But then you transition. You pivot into a chief information security officer. Chief Information Security Officers, remember, you're in a boardroom, and cybersecurity is a piece of the bigger equation. It's not the whole thing. They're talking about business and expansion and profitability and revenue and acquisitions and economics and all those factors. Security is not a big piece. Now, it's a critical piece, it's an important piece, but it's not the big piece, which means if you go in and you start talking a lot in those rooms, what ends up happening is, have you ever been in a conversation where like you had 2-3 people are talking and you're in flow and the mojo's going and you're having this really great conversation, and then somebody just asks this off the wall question that has nothing to do with anything, or inserts in some data points that have nothing to do, and everyone's sort of like, are you even here? Like, will you even listen? This makes no sense. And then they sort of shake their head off and move on. That's often what I find when I see CISOs that are struggling, is they feel like they need to talk. Everyone else in the room is talking, and they want to talk, but they don't know enough about the topic, so they try to inject in something they know about, and it just comes across as awkward, weird. And this is why you see so many CISOs, when they first start out at a company, they're invited to all the executive meetings. And within 2 or 3 months, they're uninvited. Just let you in on a hint. If you stop getting invited to the party, it's because you're a party pooper. You never get you never get uninvited to a party because you're neutral. If you're just hanging and cool, you'll keep getting invited. If you're adding value, keep getting invited. But if you're disruptive, you're not only not adding value, but you're disrupting the conversation, that's when you get uninvited. So position of love, don't get mad at me, but if you're a CISO and you are not invited to the executive meetings, if the COO, CEO, CIO, CFO, and Chief Legal Counsel are meeting and the CISO is not, that's problematic. That's because you're not viewed as adding value, and you're probably viewed as disrupting. So you don't need to talk a whole lot, but make sure when you do talk, it's very, very powerful. I sit on many boards, and this might shock you because I know I'm chatty patty here. I'm talking for 30 minutes straight. I love talking to people, but I also know that Executive Eric is different than Coach Eric. And those are different, you want to say personalities or however you want to do it, but those are different modes that I operate in, and I understand and know those different modes. If you ever saw me in business meetings or sitting on boards, I'd probably be unrecognizable to you because I don't talk a whole lot. I don't give a whole lot of opinions. I'll periodically ask for clarifying questions. But you know what everyone says about me? And this is why I get recommended by other board members. The way they describe me when companies are looking for security, cyber business folks to sit on their board, they go, Eric doesn't talk that much, but when he does, it is pure gold, and everybody in the room stops and listens. There's some people, you know, that chat a lot and people are on their phones, this and that. I will tell you, I might, in a 3-hour board meeting, speak for less than 5 minutes. But I will tell you, when I speak, everybody goes off their phones, everybody listens, because they're like, okay, this dude hardly ever talks, and when he does, it's highly valuable, so we better pay attention. That's who you want to be. You want to be the quality person, not the quantity person. And then this ties in to the next lesson learned, presenting to boards. Less is more, my friends. Less is more. I can't tell you how many times I've seen CISOs go into a board presentation where they're presenting on cybersecurity with 50 slides. And I'm just like, okay, this is going to be a train wreck. And they're like, but Eric, You even look at the slides. I'm like, I know, because it'll be even more of a train wreck when I look at the slides. I'm like, I can tell you just on the fact you have 50 slides. I don't care what they say. I don't care if they're pictures of dancing unicorns. Right? If you have 50 slides, you're going to lose their attention. You have, let me just lay this out, basic math for you. You have 30 minutes to present. You want questions, you want interaction. I typically like 10% presentation, 20% interaction. But let's just go light. Let's say 20% presentation and 10% interaction, and you have 50 slides, 20 minutes. You're doing less than 30 seconds a slide. How effective is that? You're basically, you're rushing through. When I present to boards, it's funny because if you hire me to present to a board, I'm not cheap. I'm pretty expensive, and it's funny how people value based on quantity. So then I charge all this amount, I do my pre-interviews, I do all my setup, I meet the right people so I really understand the culture and everything. And then they're like, send us your slide deck, and I send them 3 slides. And if they've never worked with me before, they're like, Eric, are you serious? We are paying you all this money and you have 3 slides. I'm like, yeah, you're paying me all this money because I have 3 slides. Anybody can produce 50 slides, but only the best can take all the information they need and put it on 3. And I'll tell you, everyone who's heard me present, know I'm worth every single penny because less is more. I forget who actually, it's attributed to a lot of different people, including presidents or others. But I love this statement where somebody went in and said, hey, can a college went to some high-end professional, maybe I think it was the president, and said, can you present at our commencement ceremony? And their response was, I am super busy. So if you want me to give a 15-minute presentation, I can't. I won't have enough time to put it together. But if you'll let me give a 60-minute presentation, I can easily do that. And for those that haven't done public speaking or podcasts or videos, it's like, that doesn't make any sense. Why would 15 minutes take longer than 60? And it makes perfect sense if you've done it, because here's the reality. If I have 60 minutes, I don't need a lot of time to prepare, because I know I can drop 3 or 4 nuggets. I mean, just awesome, amazing nuggets in 60 minutes. Now, there might be a little fluff. There might be a little extra transition, but I have 60 minutes. So as long as I have 60 minutes, I don't really have to prepare for that. But if you're going in and saying, I only have 15, and I have to add the same value, now I have to drop 4 powerful nuggets every 2 to 3 minutes, make it transition smooth with no fluff, nothing extra. Well, that's going to take me a lot more time. It's going to take a whole more time, because sometimes if you hear me present, I don't even get through my intro in 15 minutes, right? So it sounds crazy, but shorter presentations are much, much harder than longer. But the trick is less is more. Go in. And I gave you the solution. Dr. Cole's magical 3-slide CEO presentation. It's real simple. Slide 1. What are specific threats that are targeting our specific business? Not generic threats, not generic issues, but if you're a critical infrastructure, nuclear reactor in East Coast United States, what are some specific threats the executives need to be aware of? 1 slide. Next slide. What are the top risks currently targeting the organization with numbers? And that's my magical 4 column. What is the risk? What could happen? Likelihood of occurrence, cost if it occurs, and cost to fix it. Numbers. Executive loves numbers. So then I go and I show them, hey, just so you know, these are current things that could happen. These are likelihood of them occurring and cost if it occurs. Now, if I'm external and I don't know the business internals, I leave out that last column because I don't know what it would cost to fix it. I didn't do a full assessment. I don't know your business. And even if it's an internal CISO where you do, sometimes that looks like you're trying to make a money grab, and it's not. It's to be informative and get everyone on the same page. So depending on the board and what the purpose of that presentation is, I will often leave off that last column. So now what it looks like is, here's what could happen, likely if it occurs and what could happen, likely if it occurs and cost if it occurs. And that's it. I just want them to understand that, hey, there are some pretty big items that could cause some impact to the organization. Then I go and I review a few little, so then my third slide is sort of facts about cybersecurity, right? 100% security doesn't exist. It's about managing risk, right? It's about managing risk, benefit of doing it versus risk if it happens. Just 2 or 3 short bullets there, and that's my whole presentation. Then I open it up for Q&A. And I will tell you, every time, I always deliver within the time period they give me. And because I've focused it with less is more, they always run over. They always have more questions. They always have more coverage. And they always want to talk about it a lot longer because I focused in and didn't distract them. If you give a presentation and nobody asks questions, it means you've lost their interest. But Eric, couldn't have been that you did so good, they had no question. Not in 20 minutes, my friends. I'm just being honest with you. No one's that good. So if they're not asking questions, you didn't intrigue their interest. You need to engage and intrigue their interest. The next one, and this is one that I probably spend the most time on it. You don't need to prove yourself. So many first-time CISOs, they like come into the company and it's like the devil went down to Georgia, right? Just look, like they have this attitude like, you don't think I'm worthy of being a CISO, so I need to prove it to you. And what they end up doing is the complete opposite. They end up proving to everybody that they were the wrong decision. Because I'll tell you, if you are brought in to an organization as the new CISO, the company has been running. They've been surviving. They've been making money. And your security team has been doing what they're supposed to. World-class CISOs know that they belong. They know that they wouldn't have been hired if they weren't the best possible candidate. And they know who they are. They believe in themselves and know the executives believe in them. So they got nothing to prove. So they do what they're supposed to, where they spend the first 90 days learning the organization, building trust with their team, building trust with other executives, managers, vice presidents, and really integrating into the organization and understanding the organization. World-class CISOs don't make a whole lot of changes in the first 3 to 6 months because they don't know what they don't know. Terrible CISOs, ones that think they have to prove themselves, come in and just start being Wreck-It Ralph. They start changing, this firewall sucks, we need this firewall, we need this, why are we using this vendor? And they just start shredding everything, replacing everything, questioning why this project can't be done, this project, and they just start going nuts. And what ends up happening is they piss off their team, because remember, your team is the one that built the current infrastructure. So if you come in and basically criticize and say it's awful and we have to replace it, you're basically telling your team that they're terrible. You're discrediting your entire team. You've basically isolated yourself from your entire team. And then you start questioning all the other execs, pissing them off, nobody wants to talk to you. And you've basically isolated yourself, and those CISOs are usually gone within a year. So you need to know you wouldn't have been hired if you weren't the best. You wouldn't have been hired if they didn't trust you. You don't have to prove yourself. You don't have to go in and go crazy. Build trust, build rapport, and make changes slowly. And then finally, world-class CISOs focus on risk. Your job is risk. What could happen to the organization and how do we minimize it? And remember, 100% security doesn't exist. So our job is, whenever decisions are being made, what is the value or benefit? What is the risk and exposure? And is the benefit worth the risk or exposure? World-class CISOs are strategic. They're strategists. They don't get caught in the technical details. Don't get in the weeds. That's your security engineering team. Stay strategic, and you will totally crush it. So those are just some tips and tricks for you to keep in mind so you can all be world-class CISOs. Thank you for listening to this episode. If I can help you in any way, shape, or form, DM, drop me a message. Like I said, I'd love to chat with you to see if coaching makes sense, if any of our programs make sense, because I want you to get where you want to go as quick and as fast as possible. Have an amazing week. We'll talk next week.